Not all journeys begin with thunder. Some start in quiet moments beneath starry skies, where forgotten paths wait to be discovered. If you enjoy gentle quests and soft magic, like and subscribe for more bedtime stories. The sky hung low and gray over the village of Rentfell, pressing its chill breath down upon moss-shingled rooftops and dirt-threaded alleys. In the shadow of the Barrowridge Mountains, this sleepy hamlet kept its head bowed, like a dog sensing the growl of a coming storm. But beneath the earth, deeper than roots, deeper than bones, something old had stirred. A windless whisper had begun to rise from Hollowdeep Cavern, just beyond the Pine Ring Vale to the north. Few spoke of it, and none dared venture there. Except one. His name was Caelan Thorne, and he had heard the whisper. Not just in his dreams, but with a clarity that rang like crystal behind his eyes. It called not his name, but his blood. Caelan was a blacksmith's apprentice, barely 17, lean as a river reed, and known more for the stories he read than the swords he hammered. His master, old Joram, scolded him endlessly for losing himself in scrolls of ancient lore when he should be shaping iron. But Caelan had always felt that the stories were more real than the world around him. Especially the tales of the Shard, an object of immense, unknown power that had shattered the world once before, and was said to slumber beneath Hollowdeep. Most dismissed it as legend, a fireside fable to keep children from straying into the caves. But Caelan's dreams had shown him a different truth, a vision of a crystal blade buried in darkness, singing to him in a voice older than language. One dusk, as the last embers of sunlight bled into the horizon, Caelan made his choice. He packed a satchel with provisions, his father's rusted dagger, and the tattered map he had copied from a forbidden page in the village archives. He left no letter. No goodbye. Only a single black feather laid on the windowsill, an old symbol among the lorekeepers of Rentfell, meaning, "I go to seek the song." As he crossed the threshold into the northern woods, the trees closed around him like silent sentries. The wind stilled. The birds stopped their calls. Even the crickets seemed to hush. The path to Hollowdeep was not carved in stone but woven through memory, and Caelan would have to follow the whispers. By the third day of travel, Caelan's boots were torn, and his food nearly gone. The woods thickened into an oppressive maze, and at night the sounds of unseen beasts prowled just beyond the firelight. But something guided him, a pulse beneath the earth, like a heartbeat wrapped in stone. On the fourth morning, as frost painted the edges of every leaf and pine needle, Caelan reached a sheer cliff face veined with silver rock. There, behind a veil of ivy and shadow, lay the entrance to Hollowdeep, a narrow fissure that breathed out a cold mist and the scent of forgotten things. As he stepped through the cleft, the world behind him seemed to fall away. The cave's breath washed over him, and the voice in his mind sharpened, "Come to me, shaper of fate." The cavern descended in spirals, its walls slick with age and mineral. Luminescent fungi lit Caelan's path with soft blue hues, revealing murals carved into the stone, depictions of serpents coiled around stars, of warriors wielding blades of light, of a throne made from the bones of the sky. He followed the path downward, hour after hour, until he no longer knew time. Hunger gnawed, but awe dulled it. Somewhere below, water echoed like laughter, and Caelan glimpsed movement at the edge of his torchlight. A figure? No, it was gone too fast. He pressed on. At last, the tunnel opened into a great cavern, so vast its ceiling vanished into shadow. At the center, an obsidian spire jutted from a still lake, and atop it stood a crystal, fractured, humming, half buried in stone. The Shard. But before Caelan could take a step, the silence shattered. From the darkness rose a creature, twice his height, cloaked in rock and moss, its eyes glowing with the same hue as the Shard. It spoke not in words, but in memory. "You are not the first. Many have come. All have failed." Caelan stood his ground, heart pounding. He drew the old dagger. "I'm not here for power," he said. "I'm here for truth." The guardian tilted its head, almost amused. Then it lunged. Caelan ducked, barely avoiding a stone arm that slammed the ground where he'd stood. The fight that followed was chaos. Flares of energy, the scream of metal on mineral. Kalen fought not with skill, but with desperation. And just as the creature pinned him, the shards sang, and the cave responded. A beam of crystalline light burst from the shard, striking the guardian. It convulsed, shrieked, and shattered like brittle shale. Kalen lay gasping, his arms scraped and his dagger broken. But the light remained, reaching toward him. As he stepped closer, it wrapped around him like silk spun from stars. Visions poured into him, visions of a broken world, of empires fallen to greed, of a time when the shard was whole and ruled by 9 guardians, 9 bearers, and 1 betrayer, whose greed fractured the balance and buried the shard in darkness. Kalen collapsed to his knees. "Why me?" he whispered. The voice replied, "Because you remember. Because you listen." When Kalen awoke, the light had dimmed, but something had changed. The shard was no longer embedded in stone. It floated, pulsing with quiet energy, and followed his gaze. As he reached out, it settled into his palm and shrank, forming a smooth crystal amulet. Instantly, Kalen felt his body strengthen, his thoughts quicken, and his heartbeat slow to a rhythmic calm. The shard was not whole, but it had chosen him. A tremor shook the cavern, and from one of the shadowed halls emerged a path of light, leading deeper. The voice spoke again, "Seek the others. The 9 must rise, or the world will fall." Kalen pocketed the amulet and stepped forward. Back in Renfell, the wind had shifted. Crows gathered on rooftops. The village seer, an old woman who hadn't spoken in years, rose from her chair and declared, "It begins again." Black petals fell from a tree that had never bloomed. And from the farthest southern deserts to the storm-tossed isles of the east, others felt it too, a stirring, a call, a ripple in the great thread of fate. In hidden places, old blades hummed. Forgotten maps revealed glowing ink. And dreams carried the same whisper, "The bearer walks once more." Some would rise to help, others to hunt. For when a shard awakens, so do the shadows. Kalen emerged from Hollow Deep not the same boy who had entered. The amulet glowed faintly beneath his shirt. The sky above was clearer than before, stars visible even in the daylight. An omen, he sensed. The journey ahead was vast, and the path uncertain. But he knew now that the shard was only one piece of a larger puzzle. There were others, bearers, guardians, and perhaps even the betrayer's descendants. Each would hold a part of the truth. As Kalen began to descend into the next valley, the wind carried with it a name he didn't know, whispered like a promise, or a warning, Elantris. And so, the quest began. The road from Hollow Deep led Kalen through the Ridgewood Vale, a land cloaked in silver mists and haunting bird calls that echoed like broken flutes. The path was little more than a deer trail, half swallowed by moss and gnarled roots. Kalen pressed on, guided by the pull of the shard, an invisible thread tugging gently at his chest, always pointing southeast. As days passed, he sensed something new, as if the shard had begun to awaken further. Its pulses grew warmer, more urgent. Each night, it showed him glimpses of a city ablaze, great towers of obsidian wreathed in flame, and a figure walking through fire unburned. The word returned again and again, Elantris. The city had vanished from maps generations ago, spoken of only in myth as the last stronghold of the Flameborn. Kalen had no proof it existed. But he had the shard. And he had the voice. On the 6th night, a storm overtook him. Rain lashed the trees like whips, and thunder split the sky with the force of a war drum. Kalen took shelter beneath a rocky overhang, but even there, the storm clawed at him. As he huddled, shivering and soaked, a figure emerged from the deluge, a woman wrapped in a cloak of fire. Not flickering embers or illusionary heat, but living flame that gave off no smoke and did not burn the ground beneath her feet. Her eyes were ash-gray, and when she spoke, the rain bent away from her in a dome of warmth. "You carry the first shard," she said. Kalen, frozen in awe, nodded. "I am Naira," she continued, "guardian of the Emberline. Elantris burns again, and its people are not all asleep." Then she vanished, the storm parting in her wake. In her place was a single coal, glowing bright atop wet stone. Kalen reached for it, and it did not scorch his skin. Instead, it sank into the shard on his chest, and the amulet pulsed with new light. The next day, Kalen discovered a road, ancient and broken, its stones cracked by root and time. Blackened milestones pointed toward Elantris, the symbols on them flaring faintly as he passed. The forest around him began to change, its green giving way to red and orange. Leaves the color of embers drifted from trees with bark like blackened iron. The air grew dry and sweet with the scent of ash and spice. And then, just beyond a rise, he saw it, Elantris. Once a city carved into the side of a caldera, now it rose anew from its slumber. Towers of glass and volcanic stone, fire flowing like water through channels in the walls. But there was no sound, no bustle. The city was alive, but abandoned. Kalen entered alone, every footstep echoing through a metropolis lit by flame but hollow with silence. The streets were lined with statues, men and women with flames in their eyes, forever frozen mid-stride or mid-battle. In one square, a stone child reached upward, mouth open in a silent scream. Kalen felt the weight of centuries pressing in. The shard pulsed faster now, and it drew him toward the center of the city, a cathedral of black glass, where a dome of fire floated weightlessly above the roof. Within, he found a hall of mirrors, each pane showing different moments, different versions of Elantris. In one, it was a city of scholars, in another, a fortress under siege. In all, a woman of flame stood at the heart, her silhouette the same as the one who had appeared to him in the storm. Naira. She had been queen once, and she had sealed the city's fate. Suddenly, Kalen wasn't alone. The flame in the dome flickered, and from its heart stepped a young man clad in obsidian armor, his eyes smoldering like coals. He held a halberd that hissed with heat. "You are trespassing," he said, his voice rough but not cruel. "This city sleeps for a reason." Kalen stood his ground. "The shard led me." That caught the man's attention. "Then you are one of the 9. He lowered his weapon. "I am Riven, flame-bound sentinel. I guard what remains of Elantris." Riven explained that long ago, when the shard fractured, Elantris was consumed in a war of heirs, those who sought to keep its knowledge and those who would sell it for power. To stop the civil flame, Naira had sealed the city in stasis, awaiting the return of the shards to restore balance. "But now," Riven said, "you've awoken one of the embers. The city begins to breathe again." Riven led Kalen into the Vault of Fire, a subterranean chamber where the last ember of the city's heart still burned. There, floating above a pool of molten glass, was another fragment of the shard, orange gold, shaped like a dagger's hilt. Kalen stepped forward, and the amulet on his chest resonated in reply. As he touched the ember, visions overwhelmed him. Naira standing atop the highest tower, flames coiling around her crown, a betrayal in the heart of the court, and a shadow swallowing fire. Kalen fell to his knees. When the vision faded, the ember had merged with his amulet, and a flame now flickered faintly along the edge of his right palm. Not painful, but potent. Riven bowed low. "Elantris accepts you. Go now, and wake the others." Before Kalen could leave, Riven gave him a token, a coin etched with the symbol of Elantris, its surface warm to the touch. "This will guide you through flame-born lands," he said. "And it will summon help once. Use it wisely." Kalen thanked him and turned toward the gates. But as he stepped into the main plaza, a crack split the air. The sky dimmed. A scream, inhuman and full of rot, echoed from the western district. From the shadows crawled a beast, all bone and smoke, with teeth like curved daggers and eyes of violet flame. Kalen's instincts screamed. He drew no blade, he had none, but raised his hand, and the shard responded. Fire leapt from his palm in a twisting arc, striking the creature's shoulder. It shrieked, veering away, but did not fall. More followed behind it. The city had drawn them. Riven appeared beside him, blades spinning. The unseen, they hunt the shards. Together, they fought back the first wave. Kalen felt fire pour through him, not burning, but guiding. He struck with sweeps of light and ash, defending statues that seemed to shield him in turn. The shard sang louder in his chest, urging him to move faster, strike smarter. But it also pulsed with fear. These creatures should not yet be awake. Something hastens the balance, Riven muttered. They were meant to slumber longer. As the last beast dissolved into black smoke, Kalen looked down at the amulet. It was no longer smooth. Cracks glowed within it, lines of light that hinted at the shape of the hole. I have to go, Kalen said. I have to find the rest. Riven offered one last gift, a cloak woven from ember silk, resistant to flame and imbued with warmth. You'll need it where you're going, he said. The next shard lies north, beyond the Obsidian Pass, in the lands of wind and shadow. Kalen accepted it, and with one last look at Elantris, its towers flickering alive once more, he left. The coin in his pocket hummed softly. The forest outside was quiet, but the wind carried whispers not his own. He was not the only bearer awakened. Others were stirring. Allies. Enemies. He felt a name rise unbidden in his thoughts, like a warning burned across his mind, Salith. Not a place. A person. And she was looking for him. Kalen pressed on through charred woods and fire-slicked valleys. He no longer feared the journey. He feared what waited at the end. The shard within him grew warmer, and his dreams more vivid. He saw towers crumbling, oceans boiling, skies splitting open with light. The world's end wasn't coming. It had already begun. And unless the 9 rose in time, unless each shard was found and bound once more, nothing would stop the unraveling. Ahead lay wind, shadow, and Salith. And beneath it all, something deeper stirred, older even than the shard. Something that watched. And waited. Beyond the firelit ruins of Elantris, the world changed. Kalen crossed into the wind-touched vale, a high, bitter land of shifting clouds and ancient crags. The sky here moved faster than anywhere he had known. Clouds galloped across it like wild herds, casting brief shadows that whispered secrets in the grass. Trees grew bent and low, their limbs twisted into shapes like outstretched hands. The wind was constant, never still, and it carried strange voices on its currents. As Kalen walked, the shard beneath his cloak pulsed not with heat, but coolness, like breath drawn before a storm. The wind here did not just blow. It listened. And it tested all who entered. Some said the Vale was once a kingdom that rose to the sky on wings of silver. Others claimed it was cursed ground, the graveyard of forgotten gods. Kalen only knew one thing. The shard's light pointed north, into the storm. He climbed for 3 days, his path wrapping around sheer cliffs and narrow ledges. Mist veiled the valleys below, hiding ancient ruins and deep gorges. Each night, he dreamed of a woman in armor made of feathers and frost, standing atop a tower built from clouds. Her name came to him without voice, Salith. The one the shard had warned him of. In the dreams, she neither attacked nor aided him, only watched, with eyes like thunderheads. On the 4th morning, Kalen found a cairn on the path, stones stacked in a spiral, marked with feathers and bits of woven sky silk. Beneath it, he found a name etched into frost-hardened stone, Vera of the Winds, 3rd shard-bearer. The moment he touched the stone, a great gust knocked him to the ground, and laughter echoed in the clouds above. Kalen rose slowly, his cloak torn and his body scraped. Before him now stood a girl, perhaps 19, with hair like spun silver and a spear carved from a lightning-blasted tree. Her eyes crackled faintly, as if the storm lived behind them. "You're late," she said, and pointed the spear at him. "The wind's been waiting." Kalen raised his hands. "I'm not your enemy." The amulet pulsed, and the light within it briefly mirrored her own. She lowered her spear. "So, you carry a piece too." Her name was Vera, daughter of cloud dwellers and chosen of the Gale's shard. She had awakened weeks before him, drawn by the same call. But where Kalen had been guided gently, Vera had been torn from sleep by a tempest that ripped her tower from the sky. "The winds have grown wild," she said. "Something is unbinding them. Something that knows we live." Vera led Kalen into the vale proper, a hidden valley between peaks, where old shrines to the sky spirits stood half buried in snow. Here, the air shimmered with faint song, and the ground sometimes breathed like lungs beneath your feet. They spoke of their visions, of the fire of Elantris, of the dark beasts that hunted shard-bearers, and of the unknown force that moved ahead of them like a shadow cast backward. Vera's shard had taken the shape of a silver feather fused into her spear. When Kaelin asked her if she had seen Salith, Vera grew quiet. "She passed through the veil 2 days before you," she said. "She walks with ghosts. The wind will not touch her." That night, Kaelin dreamed again, but this time he was falling, not flying. And Salith's voice reached him like wine through a grave. 9 are called, but only one will bind them. The next day, the wind turned violent. Vera called it Skyrath, a living storm that circled the high peaks in endless anger. Together, they climbed toward the eye of the gale, the place where the third shard was said to lie. Lightning struck in spirals around them, never touching the trail directly but always near enough to singe their skin. The path was lined with old wind glyphs carved by monks who had once lived in the clouds, and their messages were cryptic. "Beware the mirror that breathes. Only the silent may pass. Wind listens best to those who do not ask." As they neared the summit, the storm grew brighter, not darker. At its heart was not a void, but light, a dome of skyfire, within which a tower floated without support. "The Tempest Temple," Vera whispered. "We've found it." Inside the dome, sound vanished. Even their footsteps made no echo. The tower's walls were woven from wind glass, fragile, transparent crystal formed by the song of storms. Each room within it shifted gently, like breath. At its center was a chamber of silence. There, on a pedestal of white stone, hovered the third fragment of the shard, shaped like a whisper, pulsing with unseen rhythm. Kaelin reached for it, but the moment his hand neared, the air twisted. The silence broke with a deafening scream, and from the walls emerged wraiths of air and memory. Vera shouted, her voice drowned in wind. The wraiths were not monsters, but echoes. They formed images of shard-bearers past, each one wounded, broken, or lost. "These are warnings," Vera called. "The storm tests us." To claim the shard, Kaelin had to stand within the eye of the silence, and still his heart completely. No fear. No thought. Only trust. He stepped into the circle and closed his eyes. Around him, the echoes howled. He saw himself failing, falling, burning, drowning. He saw Vera dead, Elantris in ruin, and the shard shattered anew. But he also saw something else, a woman's hand reaching through the storm. Not Salith. Someone older. Someone bound to the shard like he was. With calm breath, Kaelin quieted his mind. Slowly, the echoes faded. The whisper of the wind grew warm, and the fragment drifted into his hand. It merged with his amulet like the others, sending a spiral of wine down his arm. A new mark appeared on his skin, a feather inscribed with starlight. The wind bowed before him. The storm was still. Outside, the veil lay quiet. The sky, for once, was clear. Vera stood in awe. "You silenced the Skyrath," she said. "Not even the wind monks could do that." Kaelin didn't feel triumphant. He felt watched. As they descended from the temple, they found tracks, footprints not theirs, and not Salith's. Clawed, heavy, and following them. That night, they camped beneath a sky full of stars, and Kaelin asked Vera to join his quest. "We're stronger together," he said. She nodded. "Then we go north still. There's a path through the Stoneward Plateau. And the next shard, it lies beyond the howling gorges of Elderglen." But even as they planned, Kaelin could feel it. Salith was closer now. And the darkness at her back was moving faster. They left the vale at dawn, crossing into the highlands beyond. With each step, Kaelin felt the shard grow heavier. Not in weight, but in meaning. The power within it deepened, as if the pieces called to one another across the distances. He and Vera passed abandoned watchtowers and wind chimes that still sang, though no breeze touched them. In one ruin, they found a mural, 9 bearers standing around a circle of stars, each holding a shard aloft. But above them loomed a figure cloaked in void, its hands stretched downward, as if to take what was never offered. "That's the betrayer," Vera whispered. "The one who broke the shard first." The image filled Kalen with dread. "What if he's not gone?" he asked. Vera didn't answer. She only looked to the sky. Their journey pressed on into colder lands, where stone outcroppings jutted like frozen waves and the wind sang low, mournful songs. The shard within Kalen now pulsed with three harmonies: flame, wind, and deep crystal. But there were 6 left, and each would be harder than the last. Ahead lay Salith, and beyond her, the 4th fragment, lost in the haunted woods of Elderglen, where the trees moved when no one watched, and the fog whispered forgotten names. Kalen and Vera did not speak as they walked. They listened. For in the wind, the world itself had begun to murmur, as if waking from a long and dangerous sleep. They entered Elderglen beneath a moonless sky, the forest swallowing them whole. The trees were massive, trunks as wide as cottages, bark like stone veined with silver. The leaves above formed a canopy so thick that only a faint, greenish twilight filtered through even at midday. Fog clung to the roots like sleeping beasts, and every step stirred ancient smells, rot, moss, and something older, something that had no name. "This place watches," Vera whispered, her voice barely a breath. Kalen nodded. The shard inside him pulsed an uneven rhythm here, like a heartbeat thrown off course. The wind that had once guided him was silent. Flame dimmed. Only the crystal core, the deep memory of the shard, still thrummed, faint and wary. Elderglen was not a place of power. It was a place of forgetting. And it had no love for fire or sky. They walked in silence for hours, shadows sliding behind trunks, leaves rustling without wind. Vera held her spear tightly, the silver feather at its tip twitching without cause. "There are stories," she said, "of people who came into these woods and aged a century in an hour. Of voices that mimic your own. Of trees that move only when your back is turned." Kalen tried to ground himself, his steps, his breathing, the shard's quiet hum. But every sound in this place seemed to echo longer than it should. Once, he heard his own voice whispering from behind a tree. Not mocking. Just repeating. A child's echo. He didn't look. "The shard is close," he said instead. "I can feel it. But it's twisted. Lost." Vera said nothing, only placed a hand on his shoulder. In this place, comfort was a rebellion. At dusk, they found a glade where no trees grew, only tall grass and monoliths of black stone etched with spirals. In the center stood a tree unlike the others, white-barked, leafless, its limbs skeletal and clawed. It pulsed faintly with the same light as Kalen's shard. "That's not a tree," Vera whispered. "That's bone." As they approached, the ground beneath them trembled. From the tree's base rose a figure, shrouded in mist, tall and thin, with a face masked by bark. It spoke not in words, but in memory. Kalen saw flashes, a great battle beneath a canopy of stars, the shard torn from a dying guardian, roots growing through armor, the forest swallowing both victor and vanquished. The being's thoughts rang out. "You seek what was buried. But memory is not yours to command." Kalen stepped forward. "Then show me. Let me earn it." The spirit extended an arm of mist, placing it against Kalen's chest. The shard flared, and the forest vanished. Kalen stood in another time, Elderglen as it had once been, a living city grown from trees, its towers flowering and alive. People moved through it in harmony with nature, their voices low, their eyes bright with knowing. And at the heart of it all, the 4th shard, shaped like a seed, nestled within a living cradle of root and vine. But then came the fire. An army from beyond the mountains. Machines of steel and flame. The city burned, and the cradle shattered. The bearer of the shard, a woman named Riala, cast her soul into the roots to protect it. Her body died. Her spirit became the forest. "I remember," Kalen whispered. "And I mourn." When he returned to himself, Kalen found the forest changed. The fog had thickened. The path back was gone. Vera stood beside him, but she looked different, older, her hair streaked with gray. She blinked rapidly. "How long were you gone?" she asked. "I waited a day. Then 5. Then I stopped counting." Kalen checked his own hands. They looked unchanged. The shard, however, was glowing brighter than before. "The forest stole time," he murmured. "It tried to bury the memory of the shard. But I found her." From the tree of bone, the 4th fragment now rose, shaped like a teardrop of crystal moss. Kalen touched it. It sank into his amulet, and roots of green light spread up his arm, twining with the wind feather and flame strike already etched there. As they left the glade, the forest fought to keep them. Trees moved when they looked away. Branches curled down to block the path. Once, Kalen turned his head and saw a younger version of himself walking beside Vera, whispering lies. "Don't listen," he growled, grabbing her arm. "Keep moving." The shard's memory guided them now, parting the fog just enough for them to pass. The deeper they went, the louder the voices became, echoes of those who had failed, those who had been devoured, those who still wandered the glen in shadow and regret. Vera began to chant an old wind song, barely audible, and the shard within Kalen pulsed in rhythm with it. Slowly, the way cleared. They emerged from Elderglen battered and silent. The sky beyond was bleak, slate gray and rumbling. But it was sky. Kalen fell to his knees and let the wind touch his face. "That place," he began, but words failed him. Vera sat beside him, her face hollow. "The trees remember everything," she said. "Even what should be forgotten." They rested for a full day before pressing on, their silence speaking of ghosts they could not name. That night, Kalen dreamed again. This time, the vision was of Salith, walking a frozen lake under a sky of shattered stars. She looked at him through the dream. 4 found. 5 remain, she whispered. But not all bearers are bound to light. When Kalen woke, frost covered the earth. The north was calling. They journeyed into frostbitten hills, where snow fell even in summer and the wind howled with animal hunger. Villages were sparse and wary. People hid behind barred doors when Kalen approached. "They fear what's coming," Vera said. "They can feel it. The shards awaken, and so does what hunts them." In a mountain pass, they found an old man dying in the snow. He gave them a name with his final breath. "Kovac. The icebound. Holds the 5th. But not for you. He waits for the star-eyed one." Vera frowned. "Star-eyed?" Kalen shook his head. "I don't know what that means. But we'll find Kovac." Somewhere in the glaciers of the Northway wastes, the 5th shard pulsed like a buried ember, cold and sleeping. Waiting for war. Waiting to be chosen. As they climbed the ice ridges, Kalen felt a change in the shard. It no longer merely guided, it warned. Sharp pulses. Cold resistance. As if something about the next fragment was wrong. "Kovac may not be a guardian," Kalen muttered. "He might be a jailer." At the ridge's peak, a frozen citadel loomed, its spires cracked, its gates sealed with frost thicker than a man's chest. And in the shadows behind it, Kalen felt another presence stir. Not Salith. Something darker. The betrayer? Or one of his heirs? "We're not alone," Vera whispered, her breath fogging. "We never were." They crossed the threshold. The ice groaned. And the 5th shard sang, low and mournful, like a blade buried in snow. Kalen stepped forward, and the snow beneath his feet cracked. Ahead, within the frozen throne room of the citadel, a man sat motionless, eyes closed, hands wrapped around the hilt of a sword embedded in solid ice. His body was ancient, but not dead. Around him swirled flurries of stars frozen in place, unmoving. Kovac. The icebound. A bearer, but not like Kalen. Not like Vera. Bound by his own will, he had chosen not to pass the shard on, but to seal it within himself until the world was ready. Or until someone worthy arrived. Kalen's breath caught as Kovac's eyes opened, and they were full of stars. "So," he said, his voice like cracking glaciers, "the storm has begun again." Kalen reached for his amulet. Kovac did not move. Then come. Claim it. If you can. Kovac's breath came in misted ribbons as he rose slowly from the frozen throne, each movement accompanied by the creaking groan of ancient ice. His body was wrapped in mail forged from frost glass, glittering with veins of star metal. The blade embedded in the floor before him throbbed with a cold light that pulsed in sync with the shard around Kalen's neck. Vera took a step back. Kalen stood firm. You were once a bearer, he said. Kovac nodded once. I still am. But I am also its warden. The fifth shard cannot be claimed like the others. Not while the wound remains. Kalen frowned. What wound? Kovac gestured to the icy walls, where shadows moved behind the frost, blurred shapes of battles, of betrayal, of flame and blood. The wound in the shard. The fifth fragment remembers what broke it. The ice around them trembled. And it wants revenge. Kovac led them deeper into the citadel, where time itself seemed slowed. Snow hung suspended in midair, frozen mid-fall. Echoes of past footsteps lingered without origin. The fifth shard is memory and judgment, Kovac said. It sees not only what was, but what could have been. It is dangerous, because it tempts the bearer to rewrite. They reached a chamber where a mirrored pillar stood surrounded by runes carved in circles. Within the pillar swirled images from Kalen's past, his village, Hollowdeep, Elantris, Elderglen. But there were differences. His father alive. His friends unscathed. His life simple, untouched by destiny. The shard shows mercy, Kovac said. But mercy has a price. Will you take that burden? Kalen stared into the mirror. Not if it means forgetting why I carry it. Suddenly, the citadel shuddered. A crack split one wall, and a terrible howling echoed through the halls, like whine through broken bones. Vera raised her spear. Kovac turned, eyes narrowing. She's here. Kalen felt it too, Salith. Her presence drifted through the frozen corridors like a winter tide. But it wasn't just her. Shadows moved behind her, tall, cloaked, and faceless. Wraiths? No. Kalen recognized their silence. The Hollowed. Kovac's voice dropped. Agents of the Betrayer. They follow bearers to corrupt the shards, or shatter them. The three stood back to back, facing each corridor. Then Salith entered. Her cloak was made of frost feathers, her eyes star-bright and unreadable. You're late, she said to Kalen. And you've let the shards sing too loudly. They will all come now. Unless we end it. I don't want to fight you, Kalen said, his voice shaking slightly. Salith stepped closer, her footsteps making no sound. I don't want anything, she replied. But the shard chose me too. Her hand drifted to her chest, revealing a fragment embedded in her skin, jagged and dark, its glow faint and flickering. Kovac hissed. That piece is cursed. It was broken beyond healing. Salith's gaze didn't move. Then maybe it and I are a perfect match. With a whisper, the Hollowed surged forward, silent blurs of dark steel and windless movement. Kalen summoned flame, Vera called the storm, and Kovac drew the ice blade from the floor in one motion, sending shockwaves through the walls. The battle was swift and violent. Fire melted shadows. Wind cleaved silence. Ice held death at bay. But it was not enough. One of the Hollowed reached Kalen and drove a dagger toward his chest. The shard flared, catching the blade in midair, but the impact shattered part of the amulet. Pain lanced through Kalen's mind. The world fractured. He saw three versions of himself standing in the citadel, one victorious, one broken, and one gone. He staggered, and Salith appeared before him. She did not strike. Instead, she whispered, You saw the mirrors, didn't you? The mercy it offers? The lie? Kalen gasped. It's not a lie. It's a warning. She looked tired. It's a choice. That's all we ever have. Then she vanished into the storm. The Hollowed dissolved as she went. Silence returned. Kovac dropped to one knee. his blade dripping with frost fire. "She has a piece that shouldn't exist," he said. "A shard of the shardless. The void fragment." After the battle, the citadel calmed. Kalen approached the frozen pillar again. Within it now flickered not false memories, but a single truth. Kovac, once a leader of the Nine, sacrificing himself to freeze the shard before it fell into enemy hands. "Why didn't you pass it on?" Kalen asked. Kovac looked away. "Because I was afraid. Afraid no one would resist its pull." The blade he held began to hum. "But you've faced fire, storm, root, and loss, and you still walk forward." He held the sword out. "Then let the ice be yours. Bind the memory. Bear the wound." Kalen reached out. The blade touched his hand, and the fifth fragment flared into his amulet. The pain was sharp and cold, but when it faded, a new pattern bloomed along his arm, a snowflake of mirrored edges, spinning in slow silence. The shard was his. Kovac fell back, eyes dimming. "I'm free now," he said softly. "And so are you. But the next path leads lower." Vera helped him to his feet. "Where is it?" Kalen asked. Kovac turned his head toward a dark crack in the ice floor, one that led downward into a tunnel lit by no torch. "Below. Beneath the iron deep sea. The next shard sleeps where light cannot reach." Kalen's stomach turned. "Underground?" Kovac nodded. "Deeper than roots. Deeper than bones. And not alone." They camped one night more in the citadel. Kalen dreamed not of Salith, but of something beneath the earth, breathing slowly, like a beast in slumber. When he woke, he found his breath frozen in midair, and the sixth shard calling faintly from below. They descended into the chasm the next morning, Kovac staying behind. The tunnel was narrow at first, then widened into caverns lined with obsidian and strange bioluminescent moss. Their torches flickered against walls that seemed to ripple. "This place feels wrong," Vera muttered. "It's not rock. It's waiting." For days they followed the pulse, at times strong, at others weak, until they came to a vast underground lake, black as ink and utterly still. On a stone island at its center sat a massive statue, half submerged. The head of a god. Its eyes were open. "Is that a guardian?" Kalen asked. The shard pulsed. The statue blinked. Water erupted in a ring as the statue rose fully from the lake. It wasn't stone, it was armor. A being of ancient metal and deep-sung magic. "I am Orin," it boomed, voice like mountains cracking. "Warden of the depths. Keeper of the sixth." Vera raised her spear. Kalen held his ground. "We've come for the shard." Orin's eyes narrowed. "Then prove you are not like the last one who asked?" A pause. "She walked on water. She spoke to the dark. She left a piece of herself here." Kalen's blood chilled. Salith had passed this way. "What did she leave?" he asked. Orin pointed to the base of the island. There, half buried in stone, was a black handprint that pulsed with red light. "The shard will not wake again until the mark is purged." Kalen stepped into the lake. The water froze where he walked, forming a path of light. The amulet flared in protest, but he pressed on. Vera chanted a windsong from the shore, and the storm in Kalen's veins lent him strength. As he reached the island, the handprint began to squirm. From it rose a shadow, a mimic of Kalen himself, hollow-eyed, armed with a shard-shaped spear. It spoke no words, only moved to kill. Kalen met it with fire, wind, ice, and memory. The battle was silent, terrible, and brief. When he struck the final blow, the mimic shattered into ash. The lake stilled. The handprint faded. And from the guardian's chest, the sixth shard emerged, a prism of dark water that swirled with starlight. Kalen took it, and the sea beneath him whispered in joy. The descent from the iron deep sea left Kalen changed. The sixth shard now pulsed like a tide in his chest, shifting with the rhythm of breath and blood. The underground tunnels, slick with mineral veils and glowing lichen, finally narrowed and opened once more into the lightless rootlands of the ancient world, an underforest not of trees, but of petrified roots the size of towers, all entwined like a dead god's veins. "This is the rootless gate," Vera whispered, her voice faint with reverence. "This is where the world forgot to die." They stood at the edge of a valley filled with strange monuments, altars shaped like twisting roots, engraved with languages not spoken in over 10,000 years. Somewhere beyond, the seventh shard pulsed. It felt different. Heavy. Not calling, but waiting. The path forward was not marked by signs but by silences. Birdsong, wind, echoes, gone. Kalen and Vera passed beneath the hanging remains of trees that once grew without sunlight, their bark crystalline, their leaves fossilized in mid-rustle. Whispers began to rise from the dirt, not spoken aloud, but in the marrow. "You are not the first," the ground seemed to breathe. "You are not the last." Vera kept one hand on her spear and the other over the shard at her neck, which now glimmered pale green. The shard of the root, gifted by the Sylvans, trembled like it remembered this place. Kalen reached out to touch one of the ancient root altars. As his fingers brushed it, a voice, clear, female, sorrowful, echoed in his mind. "Return what was taken." He yanked his hand back, breath caught in his throat. "Did you hear that?" he asked. Vera only nodded. At the valley's center stood a tree. Not a real one, but a monument built from bone, crystal, and root, a totem shaped in the image of life itself. In its hollow heart, the seventh shard glowed, a molten core of amber and ash, surrounded by vines that moved without wind. "It's alive," Vera breathed. "Or at least, aware." As they approached, the vines coiled tighter. A low groan issued from the ground. Then the tree spoke. Not in words, but in pulses. Memory. Emotion. Guilt. It showed Kalen a vision, a woman, bearing the shard, refusing to pass it on. She planted it here in the tree, hoping it would be forgotten. But the shard remembered. And now it wanted out. Kalen reached forward, and the vines lashed out, wrapping his wrists and pulling him toward the trunk. The roots surged with memory, feeding images directly into Kalen's mind. He saw the woman again. Her name was Theron, a bearer before the 9 fell, and she had betrayed them all. Not out of malice, but fear. Fear that the power would be abused. Fear that if the shards were reunited, the old wars would return. She had come to this valley and given the 7th fragment to the roots, hoping the deep earth would seal it away forever. But the shard had grown restless. In the absence of a bearer, it had begun to bleed into the land, turning the rootlands into a place of stillbirth and silence. "Too long without a voice," it whispered in Kalen's bones. "Too long forgotten." Kalen cried out as the visions pierced deeper, his own doubts mirrored in Theron's eyes. What if they were wrong to restore the shards? Vera's shout cut through the trance. "Kalen! Let it go!" She hurled her spear, not at Kalen, but at the roots behind him. The impact cracked something vital. The vines recoiled, and Kalen collapsed to his knees. The tree shrieked, not with sound, but with heat and vibration. Then it opened. Not like a door, but like a wound. The heart of the tree exposed the shard fully now, its glow unstable, flickering between red and gold. Kalen stood, trembling. "I don't think I can take it," he whispered. Vera placed her hand on his. "You must. You've taken on fire, storm, frost, depth. Why not guilt?" Kalen reached into the wound. The shard burned him, but this time, he welcomed it. The moment it touched his skin, his mind burst with memories that weren't his. And then it was done. The 7th was his. The land shifted the moment he claimed it. Wind returned. The trees groaned with motion. Whispers ceased. A root bridge unfurled from the valley floor, pointing toward a cave beyond the tree. "The land wants us to continue," Vera said. "Or it wants to be rid of us." They crossed the bridge into a dark corridor, the air thick with spores and age. At the far end was a sealed stone gate, carved with 7 circles, each matching a shard's glyph. Kalen raised his hand. The amulet pulsed, and 6 circles flared to life. But the 7th, newest and wildest, resisted. It's not bound, Kalen muttered. It still doesn't trust me. He stepped forward anyway. The door trembled. Then, as if testing his resolve, it cracked open, inch by inch. They passed through into a tunnel of smoke and glass. Here, the world changed again. The tunnel opened onto a vast obsidian plateau overlooking a broken sky. Lightning arced upward from the ground into the stars. Floating islands hovered like shattered thoughts, their undersides glowing faintly with runes. Vera gasped. This is the Sky Wound, the place where the old gods fell. Kalen had heard tales of this land, a rent in the heavens left by a war no historian dared describe. The shard of thunder was said to have fallen here, a piece so powerful that even gravity had refused to claim it. Somewhere above them, hidden among the storm islands, the eighth shard awaited. But how to reach it? Kalen turned toward a flickering stair made of pure current, lightning frozen into form. That's how we climb, he said. If we can survive it. The current stairs shocked with every step, each pulse of electricity testing their bodies and their resolve. Kalen's cloak smoldered. Vera's spear sparked with each grip. Above them, the islands shifted slowly, like giants turning in their sleep. After hours of climbing, they reached one of the floating lands, a shard of a once mighty temple, now overgrown with sky vines and crackling with electric air. In the center, a figure waited. Not Salith. Not a hollowed. A woman of cloud and flame, her hair a thunderstorm, her eyes filled with stormlight. Bearer, she said. I am Mura, keeper of the Sky Wound. Speak your name and purpose. Kalen bowed. I am Kalen of Hollow Deep. I seek to restore the Nine. Mura's face was unreadable. Then you must face the Sky Trial and answer the storm's question. Mura led them to a platform of cloud glass suspended between two thunder pillars. There, Kalen stood alone. What is the storm's question? He asked. Mura pointed to the sky. It is this: what will you do when the storm turns inward? Lightning fell from above, not as bolts, but as shapes, reflections of Kalen's fears. He saw himself failing. Vera dead. Salith triumphant. A world torn by his decisions. Each bolt asked, will you bear the guilt of consequence? He stood his ground. Yes. The storm changed. Became quiet. Became light. From the heart of the cloud glass rose the eighth shard, a spearhead of thunder and wind, thrumming with unspent power. Kalen took it, and the island roared its approval. The sky above them bent, and the stars formed a path to the next challenge. As they descended from the Sky Wound on wings of summoned wind, Kalen felt the pressure of 8 shards at once, a choir of burdens. Vera watched him with worry. We're close now. I can feel it. 2 more, Kalen said. 1 hidden in time. 1 in death. They landed in a desert of glass and bone, where the sun never moved. In the distance stood a tower twisted with hourglasses, each one pouring upward. The 9th is trapped in memory, Kalen whispered. And memory can lie. The shards flared in harmony. The path was nearly complete. But as they stepped toward the tower, Kalen heard Salith's voice again, distant but close. You're almost there, brother. But what will you do when you realize the truth? The wind went still, and the sands began to move against time. The desert of glass and bones stretched endlessly, its surface reflecting not the sky above, but fragments of memories, Kalen's, Vera's, and even echoes of lives either of them had lived. With every step, they saw shadows of themselves walking beside them, Kalen as a child, laughing in a garden, Vera as a soldier cradling a fallen comrade. The tower loomed ahead, twisting like a helix built from hourglasses, gears, and fractured time. The time alt, Vera murmured. The 9th shard is within. Kalen could feel it, buried deep in the tower, sealed inside a paradox. This place doesn't remember time, he said. It hoards it. They crossed the final dune as sand flowed upward into the sky. Around them, whispers of old regrets fluttered like ash on the wind. Inside the time vault, sound behaved unnaturally. Their footsteps echoed before they moved. Vera's words repeated moments before her lips parted. The walls were engraved with clocks that ran backward, hourglasses that bled starlight instead of sand. Each floor shifted independently, as though stitched together from different centuries. As they ascended, Kalen felt moments slip away from him. Names he knew vanished from his mind. Memories blurred. He gripped the amulet with trembling hands, the 8 shards now glowing like a second spine. On the 5th floor, they encountered a child, Kalen's own younger self, no older than 10. The boy looked up and whispered, "Don't go further. You'll forget the reason you started." Then he turned into mist and floated into the gears. They climbed through a chamber where time fractured completely. Kalen was pulled into flickering realities, futures that might yet come to pass. He saw himself as a king atop a ruined world, crown broken, eyes hollow. He saw himself dead beneath a moonless sky, Vera standing over his grave. He saw himself handing the shards to Salith, willingly. Each vision tore at him. "These aren't prophecies," Vera said, dragging him back. "They're warnings." The 9th shard was not simply hidden in time, it was defended by it. The tower fed on their doubts, their pasts, their fears of tomorrow. Vera held up the Sylvan shard, its green light pulsing strong. "We need a tether. Something that can't be undone." She kissed Kalen's hand, anchoring him. "Remember who you are. Remember us." In the tower's heart, they found the Keeper of Time, a being wrapped in hourglass robes, its face a mirror reflecting only the viewer's regrets. "You seek the shard of memory," it said, voice layered with countless echoes. "But to claim it, you must surrender what you value most, a memory you cherish." Kalen hesitated. The Keeper extended a hand, and with it, a single sand-filled pendant. "Choose the memory, place it within, and it shall be sealed forever." Kalen thought of his mother's lullabies, of laughter with friends long lost, of the day he first saw Vera alive in the ruins of Sirith. He chose. Tears filled his eyes as he handed over the memory of his brother smiling, the last smile before Salith was taken. "Let me forget it," he whispered. The Keeper nodded. The memory was gone. The 9th shard revealed itself, a prism of shimmering mist and starlight, held in the Keeper's chest like a heart. With the exchange complete, the Keeper opened its arms, and the shard floated to Kalen. As he took it, time halted. The tower stilled. The mirrors cracked. The gears paused mid-turn. In that silence, Kalen saw everything: the beginning, the wars, the betrayal, the scattering of the shards. He saw Salith standing over a crater filled with bones, cradling the 10th shard, the one never spoken of. "We're not 9, Kalen whispered. "We were 10 all along." The Keeper shivered. "Some truths were hidden even from us." As the 9th shard merged with the others, Kalen collapsed. His body could no longer contain the weight of what he carried. But Vera lifted him. "One more," she said. As they left the time vault, the desert shifted. The sun froze, then blinked out, replaced by a sky of unlit stars. A path of bone and silence spread before them, leading to a rift in the world, a door not to another place, but another state of being. "The shard of ending," Kalen murmured. "It waits in death." The rift pulsed with a rhythm not unlike a heartbeat, but slower. Older. They stepped through. At once, all color vanished. The world became gray and white, shadows without sources, wind without air. Here, the dead waited. Not ghosts, but echoes, impressions left behind by lives once lived. They drifted like ash. One passed through Kalen, and he gasped. It was his father. Not as he remembered him, but as he had feared to remember, broken, dying, calling out a name not his own. The land of death was not cruel, but patient. Time did not pass here. Choices had already been made. Regret bloomed like frost across every surface. Vera held tightly to Kalen as the path led them toward the Mausoleum of Echoes, a temple built from silence and forgotten names. Here, the final shard slumbered, not buried, but entombed within the memory of death itself. A figure stood before its doors. Salith. But he was not alone. Shadows cloaked him, old bearers, long dead, called forth by the incomplete set of shards in his possession. "You made it," he said softly. "You always were the stronger twin." Kalen stepped forward. "This ends here." Saleth smiled. "No, brother. This begins again." Their battle shook the mausoleum. Saleth wielded the false shard, a copy, a decoy, crafted from stolen soul glass. Kalen's shards resisted it, their harmony disrupted. Every blow they exchanged echoed with history, memories long sealed erupted into flame, dust, pain. Vera fought by Kalen's side, her spear singing with sylvan fire. But for every wound Saleth took, a shade bore it for him. "You can't kill me," he whispered. "I gave my death away." Kalen realized the truth too late. Saleth had bound himself to the echoes of past bearers, using their memories to deflect his fate. "Then I'll unbind you," Kalen growled. He reached inward, into the ninth shard, and remembered Saleth. Not the villain. The boy. The brother. The laughter. The fear. "You don't have to carry it alone." For the first time, Saleth hesitated. The shades around him trembled. Kalen opened the amulet and released the shards, letting their truths flow freely into the mausoleum. The echoes screamed. The 10th shard, long hidden, emerged from Saleth's chest like a reluctant secret. It was black and silver, spinning with void light. "The shard of ending," Saleth whispered. "It was never meant to be held. Only buried." Kalen stepped forward and embraced his brother. "Then let's bury it together." The mausoleum shook. The walls split. The shard dissolved into light, then shadow, then nothing. Saleth collapsed. Not dead, but free. The echoes faded. The rift closed. Kalen fell to his knees, the 9 shards humming like a song finally reaching its last note. They left the realm of death not victorious, but whole. The shards no longer burned, they breathed. The world felt quieter. The stars above the desert returned. Vera held Kalen's hand as they walked toward a new dawn. "What now?" she asked. Kalen looked at the amulet, now closed, now still. "We hide them. Not scatter. Not wield. We remember." And so they journeyed back across the lands they had crossed, returning the shards not to vaults or towers, but to shrines where memory, not power, would guard them. In the forest, the sylvans waited. In the deeps, the light fish sang. And far away, the world began to dream again, not of war, but of stories. And Kalen's name became one of them. A bearer, a brother, and finally, a restorer. The journey home began beneath a sky unlike any they had known. The stars no longer shimmered, they watched. A hush had fallen across the world, as if the air itself were listening, waiting to see what Kalen and Vera would do with what they now carried. The shards, though dormant, remained warm against Kalen's chest, like sleeping hearts. They traveled first across the Vale of Returning, where every path wound back upon itself. Trees whispered in dead languages, their leaves falling upward. Vera, still bearing the scar left by the mausoleum's shadows, guided them by instinct more than map. "We aren't retracing steps," she said one night by a fireless flame. "We're walking backward through consequence." Kalen nodded, watching a fox with 3 eyes disappear into the dusk. Every creature they passed carried the silence of something left unsaid. They came to Hollow Deep not as saviors, but as echoes of themselves. The ruins had changed, restored in part by unseen hands. Ivy had grown over broken stone. The fallen dome was rebuilt in dream glass. As they crossed the threshold, the shards pulsed faintly, and Hollow Deep responded. Statues of the first bearers shifted position to face them. The air was heavier, as though the place knew its story was nearing a close. "Is this where it ends?" Kalen asked. Vera shook her head. "This is where we begin telling it." They lit the central brazier with one shard, the flame of promise, and the citadel awakened. Lights flared. Dust vanished. The voices of the old order whispered down the halls, not as commands but as prayers. "Guard. Gather. Guide." Kalen began the ritual of restitution. The first shard, The flame was placed atop the brazier. It vanished in a golden surge, rebinding itself to the bones of Hollow Deep. The forest shard came next, buried in the roots of the great tree that now pierced the roofless chapel. The others followed. The mirror shard returned to the Hall of Reflections. The stone shard sealed in the vault beneath the mountain's shadow. With each return, the land shifted, not violently, but with relief. Time rippled. Song's long silence stirred in the mouths of birds. Rain fell in places where drought had ruled for decades. But with each shard Kalen gave up, a part of him dimmed. His memories, his strength, even his warmth. "I feel like I'm fading," he said one morning. Vera touched his chest. "No. You're unburdening. There's a difference." Word of their return spread faster than wings. From across the world, those who had suffered under fractured magic or hollow faith came. Elders from the floating temples. Daughters of the drowned cities. Makers from the steel flower fields. They did not kneel. They asked questions. "What happens now? Who protects the peace? How do we know the shards won't break again?" Kalen answered with honesty. "You don't. But you'll remember how they broke last time. And you'll remember why." He gathered the people not to rule, but to release. The knowledge of the shards, how they functioned, how they failed, was recorded in dozens of tongues. The amulet was unsealed and left open in the great library, surrounded not by swords, but by pens. "If the shards are stories," he told them, "then let's tell them true." But peace never walks alone. With it came the writhe, a creeping silence, a hunger that fed on forgotten oaths. It slithered beneath cities, coiling through cracks in the world left by centuries of war. It had no face, only echoes. It found those who longed for the power the shards once promised. And it whispered. In one village, stone walls wept blood. In another, a child painted visions of a world ruled by unbirth. Vera faced the first ride caller, a priestess whose dreams had curdled into prophecy. "The shards were meant to end us," she cried. "We were never meant to remember." Vera struck her down with sorrow, not fury. "Then forget me, not the world." Kalen knew what was happening. The 10th shard, the one they thought destroyed, had seeded something behind. Not power. Not will. Absence. He returned to the mausoleum with Vera and a handful of lorekeepers. It stood intact, the echoes now dormant but restless, like teeth grinding in sleep. They searched its depths and found a sliver, too small to be a shard, but too potent to be stone. "The coda," whispered one of the lorekeepers. "The last note." Kalen recognized it. A shardling, a remnant of the 10th shard's breaking. Salith had not destroyed it. He had buried it within Kalen when they embraced. "It's part of me now," Kalen admitted. "I've been carrying it since that day." The shardling pulsed with anti-light, like a hole in existence. The lorekeepers debated burning it, binding it, throwing it into the world's edge. But Kalen made his decision. "I'll carry it," he said. "And I'll walk where it leads. Alone." Vera would not let him go alone. "Then it'll fester," she said. "And who will remember you?" Kalen wanted to argue. But he was tired of fighting her love. So they went together, into the forgotten north, where the sun never rose, and the snow whispered things older than death. They wore no sigils. No armor. Only memory. The shardling guided them to a hollow beneath the world, where the first bearers had died. Not martyred. Unmade. Their names had never entered history. Kalen knelt among their bones and wept, not for what they had become, but for how little he had known. "We were always stories," he said. "Told too late." The shardling lifted from his chest and began to sink into the stone. Not buried. Accepted. The land changed again. Subtly. Where the shardling settled, dreams brightened. The writhe faded. The world stopped bleeding from its unseen cracks. In Hollow Deep, children began to laugh without fear. Vera planted a tree atop the hollow, a white elm with silver leaves. She named it the Promised Tree. Its roots whispered to the dead. Its branches listened to the unborn. Kalen did not return to Hollowdeep. He stayed near the tree, becoming part of the silence that kept the world safe. Pilgrims came not for answers, but to sit quietly and remember the cost. Vera visited once a season, leaving behind letters and songs and slices of ordinary life. "We live now," she would say to the tree, "and we don't forget." Years passed. Seasons folded. The shards remained where they had been placed, untouched by greed or ambition. A generation rose without war. Magic was no longer worshipped or feared, but studied. Used to heal, to build, to protect, not dominate. The stories of Kalen and Vera became folklore, then lesson, then lullaby. Children played games pretending to be shardbearers, never realizing the weight behind the names. And somewhere beyond the reach of maps, Kalen grew old beneath the promised tree. He wrote letters no one read, sang songs no one heard, and smiled at stars that once wept. He had given everything. And still, he remained. Not to lead. Not to save. But to hold. The silence. The memory. The shape of the world. On the eve of his final breath, Kalen saw Salith once more, not as a ghost, not as a shade, but as a boy. They sat beneath the tree, sharing a memory neither fully remembered. "Did we do enough?" Kalen asked. Salith shrugged. "We did more than we thought we could." Vera arrived as the dawn bloomed silver, a spear of light rising behind her. "Ready?" she asked. Kalen nodded. He stood, walked to the tree, and touched its bark one last time. The shards, though scattered, pulsed once in unison. A breath. A goodbye. A beginning. Then Kalen vanished, not into death, but into story. And as the sky brightened, the world remembered him not as the boy who bore the shards, but as the man who gave them back. Decades passed. The world forgot the details but clung to the echoes. Children sang rhymes of Kalen and the promised tree. Mages etched his name into spell books as a silent thank you. Yet time, ever the slowest thief, wore away memory until only symbols remained. A feather balanced on stone. A tree with silver leaves. The shards, though long since returned to rest, still breathed beneath the earth. One day they stirred. Not violently. Not desperately. But with purpose. Across Hollowdeep, sages reported dreams shared by strangers. A white bird flying through a sky of ash, its wings shedding starlight. In the western valleys, rivers ran backward for a single night. A new age, it seemed, had begun to wake. The first to feel it was Orin, a young scholar raised in the rebuilt tower city of Galareth. A child of rain and ink, he'd studied the shardbearers not as heroes but as warnings. "No one should carry that much," he often said. But when the dreams came, silver-feathered skies and the sound of an unseen name spoken in wind, he could not look away. In his waking hours, he found his fingertips glowing faintly, and when he traced ancient glyphs, they responded like piano keys. His mentor, old Marin, watched him quietly and said only, "There are doors that only open for the reluctant." When Orin asked what that meant, Marin sighed and handed him a journal bound in roots. "The world remembers. Sometimes it calls for someone who doesn't want to answer." Orin journeyed east, following a trail of whispers rather than signs. In the sun-scorched ruins of Sorvale, he met a girl named Dahlia who could speak with fire, not control it, but understand it. Flames leaned toward her when she sang. She told Orin she'd seen the bird too. "It landed in my dreams. It looked at me like it knew my name before I was born." The two of them wandered together, meeting others marked by dreams and signs. A boy in the north whose shadow moved when he didn't. A blind smith in the Isles who hammered truths into steel. A woman whose laughter broke curses. They formed no company. No oath-bound fellowship. Just a constellation, scattered stars drawn together by something vast and unfinished. Their paths converged at Hollowdeep. The citadel was quiet, a museum more than a sanctuary. Vera, aged but unbent, greeted them not with ceremony, but with porridge and stories. She spoke of Kalen in the way old friends do, not with reverence, but recognition. He wouldn't have liked altars, she muttered one night. He liked rivers, birds, the sound of boots on gravel. When Orin asked why the dreams were happening now, Vera closed her eyes and pointed toward the east. Because something woke up that was never supposed to. Beneath the world, the shards had begun humming, not with power, but with warning. They were not seeking bearers. They were remembering wounds. Beneath the ruined spires of Ishkur, the first fracture appeared. Not in stone, but in meaning. People found themselves speaking languages they'd never learned. Maps changed overnight. Entire towns forgot their own names. It was as if the world's foundation, its story, had begun to unravel. Scribes wept ink. Time broke into pockets, where hours looped or snapped. And through it all came the bird. Not a messenger. A mirror. It showed each who dreamed it a version of themselves they were not. Dahlia saw herself crowned in fire, laughing as cities burned. Orin saw himself standing where Kaelin had once died. Only this time, he did not give the shards back. "What is this?" he asked. Vera answered. "It's the cost of forgetting." They descended into Hollowdeep's sealed chamber, the archive of memory. No one had entered it since the day Kaelin vanished. The doors recognized Orin and opened not with sound, but with breath. Inside were the last words of the old bearers. Carvings in silver. Songs in jars. Ghosts sealed in mirrors. The shards, resting in their cradles, flickered dimly. "They remember us," Dahlia whispered. But memory was not peace. Each shard trembled with strain. The world, now too complex, too contradictory, was pulling them apart again. "It's not about wielding them," Orin realized. "It's about stitching them into the story before it tears completely." They would not carry them as Kaelin did. They would sing them into place. A chorus of memory, not a weapon of light. The ritual was not one of power but presence. They carried the shards, not physically, but in intention, across the broken world. Orin to the library cities, where he taught people to write their true names in stardust. Dahlia to the flameholds, where she helped the fires remember warmth rather than wrath. Others spread wider, helping the world remember its laughter, its pain, its truth. They weren't restoring order. They were weaving acceptance. For weeks, the world shimmered. The rivers flowed forward again. Songs returned to the wind. But in the deepest part of the earth, something stirred. The writhe was not dead. It had simply become patient. It returned not as silence, but as doubt. Scribes began forgetting their own names mid-sentence. Lovers woke up strangers. Stories collapsed into static. People no longer feared monsters. They feared forgetting why they mattered. Orin and Dahlia reunited beneath the promised tree. It was dying. The silver leaves had blackened. Vera, now near her end, sat beside its roots. "We remember too much," she rasped, without understanding it. She handed Orin a seed, small, dark, warm. "This is the covenant. Not power. Not prophecy. Possibility." He planted it where Kaelin had once knelt. As the tree withered, the seed shimmered, and roots plunged silently, choosing depth over display. From the seed rose not a tree, but a choice. Everyone in the world, in dream or waking, was offered a single moment, to carry a truth they'd long hidden. Not to declare it. Not to be rewarded. Just to know it, and not flinch. Those who accepted began to glow faintly, not in light, but in clarity. The world grew honest. Not perfect, but anchored. And the writhe, starving of contradictions to feed on, withered. The shards sank deeper into the world, no longer tools but tendons. The sky grew quiet. The dream stopped. The white bird landed on the tallest peak and became stone, watching forever. Orin returned to Galareth, not as a hero, but as a teacher. Dahlia disappeared into the southern coast, where she taught fires to dance instead of destroy. The others faded into myth. But every so often, a child born under a moonless sky would see feathers in the corner of their eye, or hear a voice asking a simple question. "What do you remember?" And they would answer, sometimes in silence, sometimes in song. And the world, in turn, would sigh, and stay whole for one day more. The skies were quiet now, not with stillness, but with fullness. The kind of silence that followed a great song, when no one dared speak for fear of diminishing the echo. Across Hollow Deep and the outlands beyond, life resumed, not with banners or bells, but with breathing. Farmers returned to furrows once lost in stormlight. Storytellers began to speak again, their words laced with truth rather than spectacle. The promised tree stood no more, but in its place rose saplings in secret places, trees that bore no fruit, only questions. And those who sat beneath them often found the answers were not spoken, but remembered. In this world healed not by victory but by memory, a subtle rhythm pulsed. Yet in the quiet corners of dusk, something remained undone, not a threat, not a foe, but a thread. Kalen awoke. Not in a tomb, nor a palace, but beneath a sky he did not recognize. Stars spun in new patterns. Grass grew in colors the world had never borne. And beside him stood a girl with eyes like open books. "I dreamed of you," she said. "But I don't know your name." Kalen, whose body had long ago crumbled into earth, felt neither old nor young, only possible. The land was not Hollow Deep. It was something after. A continent without shape, where rivers flowed into the sky and stories wrote themselves in roots. The girl, Era, explained what little she knew. This was the undrawn thread, a realm born from all unspoken endings. The place where forgotten heroes go when their stories no longer bind them. Era was a weaver, not of cloth, but of paths. She could hear the lingering steps of lives left unfinished, and sometimes she pulled them back into form. "You're here because something about your story is still open." Kalen looked at his hands. No shards. No weight. Yet still he felt the hum of duty, not the crushing kind, but the kind that sings from deep within, like a bowstring waiting. In the undrawn thread, time folded. Kalen met echoes of himself, versions who made different choices. One who had kept the shards and ruled. One who had destroyed them. One who had never found them at all. They passed through him like wind, never speaking, but never vanishing. This was the realm of questions. And somewhere in it, a final choice waited. Together, Kalen and Era wandered the undrawn thread. They walked cities of candlelight where memory was currency. They climbed mountains whose peaks showed not vistas, but moments. On one summit, Kalen watched Vera's last breath. On another, he saw Orin plant the seed. And beneath them all, in the roots of this realm, pulsed something ancient and uncertain, a gate. Era said it had been closed for ages, sealed not by magic, but by silence. "There are things even stories don't dare speak of," she whispered. But Kalen felt the drawl, subtle but certain. "Something behind that gate remembers me," he said. "And I think I remember it." The gate, when they found it, was not made of stone or iron, but names. Thousands of them, written in every language that had ever lived. Kalen placed his hand upon the gate. It did not open. Instead it asked, "Who are you, without the shards? Who are you, without the world that needed saving? Who are you, when no one is watching?" The question struck deeper than any blade. Kalen, who had once carried the weight of nations, now faced only himself. And he answered not in words, but in understanding. "I am the one who gave it back. I am the one who chose not power, but surrender. I am the space left behind when the tale is told." The gate shimmered, and wept. From its cracks spilled starlight, not blinding, but inviting. Era took his hand. "We can go forward. But not as heroes. As threads." They stepped through. Beyond the gate was the loom, a vast sea of stories, endlessly weaving themselves into stars. Each tale formed constellations that shifted as people remembered or forgot. Kalen saw his own once bright thread now dim, stretched into many others. Orin, Dahlia, Vera, unnamed farmers and firewalkers. His sacrifice had not ended the tale, it had multiplied it. In the loom, stories were not isolated. They were inherited. And new threads had begun to glow. "The next world," Era said. is not built on battles. It's built on inheritance. Kalen wept, not for sorrow, but for fullness. He understood now. He had never been the hero, only the hand that passed the torch. They wove one final thread together. Not a weapon, not a wall, but a bridge. A tale of quiet hope. Of choosing to heal instead of triumph. Of listening instead of leading. The loom accepted it, and in return, offered them a gift, obscurity. Kalen would not return to the world. Not as myth. Not as memory. But as soil. His name would fade, but his choice would echo. Eris smiled as she too began to fade. We were never meant to be remembered. Just felt. The bridge crossed the loom and descended into the waking world, landing gently in the heart of a child who had never heard of Hollow Deep but dreamed of silver trees. In the waking world, the saplings bloomed. In orphanages, children began drawing white birds without knowing why. Farmers found seeds they had not planted. Sailors followed stars that didn't exist on maps. The world was not perfect. There were still storms. Still hunger. But there was also thread. Invisible bonds connecting strangers across distance and pain. And sometimes, on windless nights, people would hear the faintest hum, like glass singing under thumb, and feel that they were part of something older than sorrow. Not all stories end with glory. Some end with weaving. Oren, now gray of hair and quiet of voice, stood beneath the first sapling. It shimmered faintly, and in its bark was carved a single feather. He taught no more. He listened. People came from distant lands to sit beside him and speak of dreams. He offered no wisdom, only presence. Dahlia returned once, laughing. Her hair was braided in flame. The fire sings lullabies now, she said. Together, they sat beneath the tree and did not speak. They needed no words. Above them, the stars rearranged themselves once more, no longer telling a story of triumph or sacrifice, but of continuance. The tale had not ended. It had only become the ground. And far beyond, in a place no map dared draw, the loom continued to turn. Threads crossed, frayed, knotted, and healed. New stories bloomed. New heroes rose, not in armor, but in kindness. And among them, perhaps one day, a child might ask, "What was the shard of Hollow Deep?" And someone might answer, "A gift that chose to return itself." And the child would nod, and carry a new thread forward. And in that moment, across time and memory, Kalen would smile, not as a name, but as the thread that chose not to break.